Alright, and this is chapter 2. What I want to talk about in this section is particular principles that we can memorize and really apply when we're talking about artistic distortion. Now, when we talk about distortion, a lot of that we're talking about movement. So a lot of these rules have to do with how the body moves. So here is a great slide that talks about the line of action. The line of action is a rule that means that all movement can flow through one basic quote-unquote line throughout the figure, and that everything, all other elements of the body, the hands, in this case the tail, everything, if it follows that line of action, the movement will be that much more fluid. So for instance, we have here the image on the left, and we can see the characters hitting each other, in the face. It comes across, the idea comes across, but it's not as smooth as it could be, right? So then if we move to the right, that's how much better is this? That's so clear, so obvious, and just feels right compared to this, correct? So if we look at the character on the right, look at that really clean, smooth punch. Everything in the body follows that. The only thing that breaks it is perhaps this leg here, but that's for balance, and that has to be there. But this arm follows it. This arm doesn't go completely with this line of action, but it still follows it. The ears, the face, everything goes with that line. So again, we have another example here where we have, the cat doing the movement, and it reads, but not as good as this, right? And that takes an extra layer of awareness as you're working on your own pictures, because a lot of the times we'll do a drawing, it's in proportion and it's correct, it's believable, and we'll call it a day. But that drawing can be incredibly improved if it has a nice clean line of action. And a line of action doesn't have to just run through an extreme movement like a punch or swinging a bat. It can be the most simplest movement, sitting down, just a simple stand. Can have a nice clean line of action. That's what you want. We have all these examples down here of nice clean lines. So here's an abstract representation of this, right? Because even though we're drawing humans, we're making marks that turn into humans, and those marks are abstract shapes. So if we think of those marks as having a direction like this, particularly the first two, we're in a good place. If we start to use lines or lines of actions that look perhaps like this, it's not as obvious. We want to have nice, confident lines and line of action that move throughout the figure. So imagine if this was an actual figure through here, right? I mean, perhaps that could be a snake, but it's not going to be obvious what they're doing. But if there's an actual person you were drawing behind this mark here, they're probably jumping, or they're, very upset and they're just yelling at someone really stiff. So imagine all the line of action you draw through your figures as having a very clear direction, particularly in the abstract. So here's an example here, and I think this applies to a lot of study that we do when we're studying movement. Because when we're studying movement, we're usually looking at perhaps a live model, or we're looking at a photograph. And the thing with those circumstances is that the model, in either case, is probably being posed at no fault of their own. That's just the result of the situation. They kind of have to stay there and balance themselves. So perhaps the movement might look like this. And this is what we study a lot. But in reality, the improved and better drawing is going to be what's happening down here. Off the ground, right? Nice clean line of action. More fluid. Right, more exaggerated. This is actually how it's going to be at the millisecond that this person is running. So always ask yourself, are you drawing a pose, or are you actually drawing the movement? So this is a nice example from vintage Mickey Mouse comic. So check this out. Everything flows along the main action line, even the puff of air coming out from the bird's mouth. His feet both flow along the same curve of the body, the same similar thought towards Mickey. So literally, we can push this to every element. Say for instance, you had this bird character here, and you had some of the environment around him moving at the same angle as that line of action. Even the words in the scene move at that angle. So you can see we can design all the marks and all the elements of a figure, his environment, his composition, and push action, push movement, and exaggeration. That's not necessarily going to happen in real life, but you can interpret that in your drawing and really push the action and the emotion in your own image. So if we look at all these examples of Mickey, look how nice this is, right? Mickey is running to the left, so we have his hat, which is slightly pulling back. His ears are pulled back because he's running and the gravity in the air is pulling those back. His tail is sticking back. This stick that he has here on his shorts or his pants, that's also leaning back because of the movement he's doing. So as we draw the figures, perhaps the way the wrist, the angle of the wrist, the fingers, the hair, where the clothing on the figure is, where that's tense at, where that's moving, right? Because sometimes, for a specific example, if you're doing a character running and you're working off a reference photo that you shot, the clothing isn't going to be very tense on the body, at least as far as movement is concerned, because the person is just standing there. But you can imagine if you're running really fast forward, the clothes is not going to catch up to your body, so it's going to be pulling backwards a little bit. So if you look at your reference photo and you say, oh, okay, this person's moving forward, then you pull the clothing as if it's being pulled back. You have the hair blowing in the breeze a little bit. You can start to imagine how that's going to help your drawing. So going back to more realistic drawing, it's all about the flow. It's all about that line of action. So this is a way you can apply that in actual figure drawing, where you can get a yellow highlighter or a colored pencil, any sort of thing. And one of the very first marks you make on your figure is the line of action, and you build your figure around them. But these sketches are perhaps maybe a minute long, and this could be an excellent activity for you to learn this. You want to get the big idea down first. Okay, so what this illustrates is very important in that when we're trying to draw action, the best action marks have curves to them, right? When we see comics or animation and the characters moving very fast, their limbs appear to be tubes. Now, for me, I had a hard time with that because I thought the human body isn't a tube. That doesn't make sense. The human body has more straights and angles. But you have to think about how the eye works. When a limb or an arm moves very quickly in front of the eye isn't going to capture every single frame of that. It's going to capture basically a motion blur. And if you were to freeze that motion blur as you are right here in the middle of this movement, the eye is capturing the blur, and the blur appears to be very curvaceous. There's going to be a lot of curves in it, right? Almost like a tube. So when you're drawing a movement that's going very quickly past you, you can literally blur it, but a lot of the times we're not trying to literally blur that limb. So all of a sudden we make it a tube that's very curved. We lose some of the detail and just make it a curved tube. And that is going to feel a lot quicker, a lot more action orientated. And that's why, is because the eye can't necessarily pick on fast movements, so we have to break the bones a little bit in our drawing. And we can see an example of that in this section here. So then, if you imagine you have your more still drawings, a few more right angles, a little more rigid, in a sense, compared to your action-orientated drawings, which are more tube-like, more curved lines, you'll be able to differentiate between the actions. So just to reiterate down here, don't worry that your first figures look like rubber hoses. First you want to get the big statement down, and then after that you can put on the anatomy. So keep your initial drawings very simple, almost like this. These are drawings by Walt Stanchfield, who's a famous instructor at Disney, and I like to show these drawings because what's inside these drawings, the energy, the movement, the statement, is the same level of communication you want in your final drawings. You want this level of life in your drawings. So you have your very first initial line of action, and you sketch in perhaps a very simple sketch on top of it looking like this, and then you add your detail. The worst way you can go about drawing a figure, generally, there's exceptions to the rule, is if you start in there with your details right away. You might get an impressive drawing with detail, but it's going to be very dead and stiff. And finally, a big thing I always notice with a lot of students is they're very careful with their line work, especially at the beginning. But this is a note by Glenn Keane, the animator from Disney, very famous, one of the best animators ever. And these are his drawings. These are his early drawings. You have to draw along the form, keep it very solid, and go crazy. Figure it out. Your pencil, you're searching for it. So I love to print out this drawing specifically and put it above my drawing table and use it as a reference for the amount of energy and the searching I should put in my drawing. And then from here we can refine it. But if we start really loose, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to keep the life in our drawings down the line. And then really quickly, let's look at just a few examples, and we're going to continue this in the next section. A few finished examples, and these are by the artist James Jean. And these are his figure drawings from life. And look at the line of action, so obvious in all of these drawings, so much energy, so much exaggeration. A few more here, and look how he's actually using perspective to push the action. This foot and leg is coming a little forward, this one is kicked back. Same thing with the arm compared to the head. So, with that in mind, let's move on to the next chapter and we'll look at some additional art.